When we speak of the psyche, we usually mean an internal mechanism that governs the functionality of a human being. Fundamental questions here are: how do human beings work? How do we function? Even a toddler will tell you that if you want to know how something works, you must pick it apart and build it back again. So, let's break down the psyche, shall we? For the purposes of this presentation, let's break down the functionality of a human being into 4 distinct parts. 1. Physical sensation and bodily movement. 2. Emotional state and somatic changes. 3. Thought and thinking patterns. And finally, 4. The unconscious processes. These are the levels of integration from lowest to highest. Since we will be studying ourselves, we must apply some measure of distinction between these parts. The volume of intensity seems to be the most appropriate here. In the illustration that is to follow, I will use loudness as a metric. You can change it into brightness or any other metric, it will work the same. This is an illustration that we will be working with. Let's start with the loudest and the most familiar part, physical senses and movement, which is represented by this section right here. Emotion and somatic changes are represented by this section, interpretation and thought by this, and finally we have the belief system or the system of values over here. This is the default setting. When the organism is in action, the loudness of these parts fluctuate. That's why I draw these lines, which represent the max volume. On occasion, the volume of the loudness of emotion will exceed that of physical sensation, and the physical sensation will fall in the background. It's still there, but it's not as loud as this. In case of thinking almost never exceeds the loudness of senses. Even if you are perfectly still, you can only almost hear your thoughts compared to the sounds that you hear physically. The belief system is the most silent part. All this noise is happening at once. Unless you learn to distinguish the frequencies, you never hear this part. I mean, it's there, but you really need to listen. And it is more difficult to do than it sounds. Before we put this into a practical example, I want to discuss another aspect, that direction, these 2 arrows here. Physical sensation produces emotional state, which allows for interpretation, which then is evaluated according to the belief system or the system of valuations, which produces thought, which causes emotion, which causes action, which causes more physical sensations, and the process repeats itself. But instead of moving in a circle, it's a 2-way traffic that happens simultaneously. And now, let's put this into practice. Meet a hypothetical person A. A has a job and he lives alone in a single bedroom apartment. We will take his Monday morning routine and make a study out of it. A simple graph will suffice to illustrate our example. X-axis will be used for time and Y-axis will be used for the level of intensity, 10 representing the max volume. Our task is to highlight the intensity of each part and to see how they work together as a whole. For the latter, we will use a second graph where Y-axis will be used to measure efficiency. So, let's start with the physical awareness. A is sound asleep. His body and his senses are minimally active. The alarm goes off, and immediately there is a spike in physical awareness. He turns off the alarm, and the intensity of physical awareness drops because he is still dozing, not yet completely awake. A slowly gets out of his bed and wanders off to the bathroom, performs his bodily functions, brushes his teeth, and the moment he washes his face with cold water, there is another increase in awareness because his senses were stimulated and now he's waking up. A steps off the bathroom, goes to the kitchen, puts water to boil, sits down, and scrolls through his phone. With the beginning of scrolling, there is a slight decrease in activity. Once the water is done boiling, he gets back up, makes himself a cup of coffee, and proceeds to pack his lunch while taking sips. Again, there is an increase in activity. plus the effects of coffee. Once A is done with the task at hand, he sits down and scrolls again in order to finish his drink. Due to the effects of coffee, there is no drop in awareness this time. When he's done, he goes back to his room, dresses up, goes back to the kitchen to pick up his lunch, and proceeds to leave his apartment. This is what person's A morning routine looks like. We have documented his physical sensations and his physical actions. Now, let's go over the routine again and document what he is doing emotionally. For the sake of simplicity, let's assume that A is waking up from the state of deep sleep. Because if he was to wake up from REM sleep, the intense emotion of the last dream he had would continue and it would complicate things. The moment the alarm goes off, there is a disturbance to his peace and he feels irritated. When he turns the alarm off, the intensity of his feeling starts to go down rapidly. He remains relatively calm until while brushing his teeth he remembers a good weekend he just had and feels joyous for a second. When he sits down to scroll, again there is an increase of intensity of the emotions that he feels. Maybe it's news that piques his interest. Maybe something funny comes up, or something that riles him up for a second or two. When he proceeds to pack his lunch, he calms down again. When he sits down to scroll for the second time, the emotional activity comes back up again. And when he proceeds to leave, he calms down yet again. Now we will look into the thoughts that A thinks during all of this. When alarm goes off, A thinks to himself, I need to get up. Halfway of getting up, and he thinks, I need to go to the bathroom. When he brushes his teeth, he quickly goes over the events that took place over the weekend and reassures himself, boy oh boy, what a weekend. When he washes his face and looks into the mirror, he mentally tells himself, I need some coffee. When he's scrolling, he keeps repeating to himself, this is interesting, this is funny, this I cannot stand, etc. I have highlighted only the loudest of his thoughts, but remember, when A is going about his business, he's constantly doing the commentary on everything. But according to his system of values, this commentary is not important and he ignores it. According to him, only the thoughts that lead to action are important, and that's why he's paying attention to them and only to them. While the belief system is organizing all of this, in and of itself it remains constant and stable throughout the entire experience. Nothing major is taking place, everything is stable and there is no need to re-evaluate anything. The overall efficiency of the system remains relatively high. The organism is doing what it is supposed to be doing and there is no need for alterations or change of directions. Everything that is taking place is within the limits of normal. Now I can introduce a hypothetical person B. The routine is identical except for one major variable that causes an extreme change in the middle of it. Say, when he scrolls, he finds out that the relationship that he depended upon is over. All of a sudden, the belief system starts making noise. This causes his thoughts and his emotions to go haywire. In turn, this raises his blood pressure and the organism becomes disturbed as a whole. In a matter of seconds, his life theory collapsed. Now he needs to re-evaluate the unconscious plan according to which he lives. Nothing makes sense anymore. Since his unconscious views of life are no longer valid, the efficiency of the system drops significantly. If the disturbance within the system of values is not resolved, the organism cannot return to its optimal efficiency. It may regain a temporary efficiency by force, but for as long as the problem within the belief system is unresolved, the organism will continue to experience the episodes of inefficiency at intervals. Generally, we refer to this as trauma. I think that's enough for the video. That's it.